In school, what were you famous for? My full name is 22 letters long. More often than not, my name would decide the width of the name column in every class I was in, and therefore stood out quite a bit. I only wish it was not a boys-only school. I remember one time toward the end of 8th grade I was called on to answer a question and the girl sitting in front of me was like, "Are you new?" And the girl next to her was like, "Wait, Jay, when did you get here?" I told them I had been there the entire year and the 2 years before. What's even weirder to me is that I'm not especially quiet. I was probably one of the more active participants in that class and they still had no idea that I was there the entire year. My nickname. My name is Adam. My parents were happy because they named my brothers and I with impossible names to shorten into nicknames, but in my case they were wrong. I grew up in the 1980s and you will no doubt understand why that's relevant when you hear what the other kids decided to call me. They shortened my name Adam into AIDS. My nickname for 40 years has been AIDS. In grade school one day I pretended I was from the future. For shits and giggles. But then over time it kinda turned into a thing. Eventually it got to the point where it would do more harm than good to admit I was not from the future. I don't recall how it happened. I just remember wishing people would stop asking me if I was from the future because I didn't want to talk about that anymore. Not much different from Potato Guy in retrospect. My daughter used to sell candy bars and one of her teachers asked where she was getting her candy bars from. My daughter didn't have a particular place where she would get them, sometimes Costco, Smart and Final, Rite Aid, CVS, basically whoever had a better sale. So since she didn't have a quick answer for him, he was like, "You know I make more than you? Really, that's what you tell a 9th grader selling candy? Shit, I hope he makes more than a kid just selling candy bars at school." Anyways, I thought that was inappropriate to tell a student. Mind you, my daughter would give a candy bar here and there so she could sell candy bars in his class. Long comment. I changed the whole teachers take the phone if you use it thing. I live in what can be considered the hood. 99.95% of the school's students had immigrant parents, and more than half were of African or Middle Eastern descent, so our very white teachers and principal were fucking barbaric. It didn't matter what for, if they caught a glimpse of your phone they would take it, and the rule was that they got to keep it for 3 full days, without giving it back. When I was in the 9th grade, school went from 5th to 9th, we had to write argumentative texts about whatever subject we wanted, so I chose that rule. Of course I mentioned that students shouldn't text, play games, browse online etc. during class, but that it was bullshit that the punishment was the teacher keeping the phone for 3 days. The text was long, aggressive even, and I said that they could keep it for the remainder of the class, at most until the end of the school day in the case of students disturbing the class and giving an attitude. We had to read our texts in front of the class, but my anxiety-filled ass begged my teacher to only read it for her, but after hearing it she asked me to read it to the school board. Thank God for this woman, OMG, a saint among those racist vultures, and the rule was quickly changed to teacher may only confiscate a student's phone until the end of their class. Guy had everyone kissing my fucking feet for that. The teachers were fucking cartoonishly evil at one point. I did this before when I was in high school. A teacher took my unlocked phone from my hand and proceeded to open my messaging apps and read my private conversations. Told her she could give my phone back or I'd be calling the police for theft of property and invasion of privacy. She laughed it off and said that she was well within her rights to do what she wanted with my phone. She stopped laughing when I walked out of the classroom. Through the school gates, there was a police station literally about 4 minutes away, and she came waddling over at the speed of light to give me my phone back. Getting knocked on my head before school one day and having a seizure. It was before they opened the doors so everyone outside saw what happened, and then the ambulance came and I was awake but I was blacked out and my friends told me I tried to fight the paramedics off. I don't remember anything from hitting my head to coming to in the ambulance with some type of amnesia. I didn't know who I was or where I was and I was strapped down, so this made me panic even more, and I think I tried to spit on the paramedics so they covered my face with the oxygen mask and I'm pretty sure it wasn't turned on. I couldn't breathe. It was one of the scariest moments of my life and it still kind of haunts me to this day. When I woke up they didn't try to tell me what happened. They didn't say shit to me to try and calm me down. They just kept telling me to be quiet and calm down. How the fuck can I calm down when I am strapped down and don't know what the hell is going on? Anyways, I was the seizure kid. Not me but a friend of mine. One day my friend, let's call him Jim, found out the email address to email the entire school. Jim then realized that using the same address but altering the school name, he could email each school in the county. Jim proceeded to email the entire B-movie script to all the high schools in the county. Jim will be remembered forever. Was more than 35 years ago now, but in high school we watched Gandhian social studies. I was so influenced by it I wore a bedsheet to school one day and preached nonviolence. Luckily I did have Adidas shorts underneath as it got repeatedly tugged by just about everyone. Being the school hacker dude. My daughter found out 20 years later when a retired teacher turned substitute took attendance in her class. Got to her name, said I remember the last name, he took over all the computers in the school, ... The rest of the class turned to look at her wide-eyed. That was when she started to learn about her dad's past. Edit, words. Set the wobble machine to the mid-90s, before the internet was everywhere and everything, before graphical operating systems were mainstream, when we still used screaming robots to communicate over telephone lines. To answer your question, pretty much whatever I wanted. Security was non-existent and network setups were new outside of corporate settings. Our school got outfitted with hundreds of IBM 386s connected via token ring and nobody really understood it all. I was one of the few kids that grew up with and around computers, so it was almost second nature. Learned a whole lot about networking those years. Anyway, I could view, move, delete anything, regardless of user, managed to lock out the entire keyboard in class for like a week, had the library's tractor-fed printers dump their umpteen thousand-page boxes of paper on the floor, there were 4 of them, and the traditional hide the games on the server. No Doom, only 1 megabyte of RAM. I earned similar fame on the local BB says back when. War dealing, calling via payphone on a battery-powered acoustic coupler, all the geek silliness. I was absent just as much from high school, but I wasn't famous for my absences, I was famous for being crippled. I was the only kid in the school out of 2,000 kids who was in a wheelchair, so pretty much everyone knew who I was, the guy in the wheelchair, but almost no one actually knew me. But yeah, like 95% of the time at school, I was ignored, ostracized entirely by everyone, and 5% of the time I would get bullied. Either way, it was an unenjoyable experience and I developed an attitude of just not wanting to go to school. I would miss 2-3 days per week, every week, all 4 years of high school, so I was absent basically 50% of the time. Under normal circumstances the school would have sent someone like me to truancy court, but they roped off my absences as being because of my disability and never took any action against me or even said anything about it all 4 years. Let me premise this with no one was hurt, and my teacher fell out of his chair laughing. I was a techie in high school. During a specifically awful rehearsal of a show the school was putting on, I was working lights up in the balcony as our tech teacher, who couldn't take the musical disaster anymore, sat below at the director's booth. At some point he sarcastically said into our headphones, "Someone please just throw a wrench at me." So, I did. I was the QB in BG, but a super nerd, so all my geek friends showed up to the games and cheered for me with weird math rhythms and gave the other players Star Trek-based nicknames and would yell them lovingly at players. You couldn't tell much in the football games, but you could hear it in the gym for basketball and it was pretty fucking hilarious, especially seeing how the other teams reacted. I was called a trash picker and garbage boy in school. My family was dirt poor BC of bad financial skills. Father was school's janitor and mother often between jobs. They spent all their money of credit-fueled vacations and shopping sprees, so I had to eat from trash when we were poor but made too much for discount lunches. Used to be the only way I had anything was to pick from the trash. Trapper keepers were highly prized and I picked mine from the trash and fixed the binder clips. In high school I had a dozen Game Boys when everyone got Game Boy Colors and threw their old ones out. Probably why I am a scavenger to this day and sitting on a recliner chair that I found on the curb. Getting kicked out of class. Fun facts about me: when I hit middle school, 6th grade, I completely gave up on doing any work. It wasn't that I didn't understand it, or wanted to cause a hassle for anybody, I just grew into one of those if I don't want to do something, I'm not gonna do it phases. This phase lasted until 8th grade, when I dropped out of school altogether. Literally every day from 6th to 8th grade, I'd get kicked out of every single class I was in for simply not doing anything. I'd walk into class, sit in the back, and just stare at the clock. About 20 minutes into the period, the teachers would ask something along the lines of, "Are you going to do anything today?" I'd always say a simple no. And boom, I was in the principal's office until the end of the period. Rinse and repeat. It happened so often that by the time I entered the 8th grade, I'd literally be in a classroom for 30 seconds before being sent out. "Hey, before you sit down, are you going to participate?" "No. Go to the office." You would think somewhere along the lines they would have thrown me into the special needs class, or just kept me in the office from start to finish, but nope. The only punishment I received was in the 8th grade detention until further notice. That didn't last long, because I would never show up. I stopped going to school when I was 14, and was on the run from the truancy officer until 16. Once I hit 16, I officially signed out of school. I am now 27 years old, don't even live in the same part of the country anymore, and people that I went to middle school with on Facebook still regularly recall all the times I was kicked out literally every day. Just a little silver lining though, I got my jet and I am currently in my 2nd year of college. Better late than never, right? LOL. Emailing the whole school calling out the principal for being a clown. Basically, when I was a senior we all planned a senior skip day and the vast majority of the teachers were in on it. The principal, however, obviously didn't know. Well, someone snitched and the principal found out in the morning of our skip day. We all woke up to an email threatening suspension to anyone who skipped classes the day, in addition to having a letter sent to our respective universities describing our misbehavior. I rolled out of bed and rushed to class late. With about 20 minutes or so left, I drafted the masterpiece of all emails. When I tell you this thing was an essay, it was long. And I cut deep. Basically, I copy and pasted the school's mission statement preaching all of their values and called the principal out for reacting like a child. I proceeded to tell him that his time would be better spent bridging the gap between students, faculty, and administrators, seeing as how he didn't ask any of his colleagues what was going on. Anyway, after sending that email, the principal was supposedly quite distraught. My friend in the class he was teaching actually told me he muttered something along the lines of "dick move" upon reading the email. I was slated for a lot of trouble with this one, but apparently a lot of students showed the email to their parents who were all in on bashing the administrators, not to mention it was a very professionally written email. Needless to say, I got away with no discipline, and actually got a grade-wide apology from not just the principal, but the head school administrator. That was definitely the most commotion I've ever caused, as I was a pretty quiet kid who liked to mind his own business and never be the problem, so to say. But yeah, people seemed to enjoy that one. Voted schools nonconformist in the 12th grade yearbook. A teacher told me to go for a picture. I told her no. She told me that's just the kind of thing that got me voted unanimously in the first place and ordered me to go for the picture. I told her it would be more appropriate if I just walked out of the room and did literally anything but go get my picture taken. Frustrated, she offered me $5 to just go do it. This was back in 2001 when $5 was worth something. The year before I would sneak out at lunch and go to McDonald's for the 19-cent hamburgers. BC, it was cheaper than the low-income discount lunch hamburger at school. Anyway, I begrudgingly took the $5 and went for that stupid picture. Yearbook people also wanted to use some artwork I painted for the yearbook. I said no and they declared they would use it anyway. I dumped paint on the paintings to destroy them. Didn't realize they took picture already and just put it in yearbook as unknown artist. Fucking Hugh C. Williams, class of 2001. In middle school, a bunch of my classmates decided I was a lesbian and a witch, so I leaned into both. Started walking around school with my hand on my best friend's ass and pretended to put curses on people. Pretty great. There's a sort of ironic twist to this, which is that actually before all that started I was super Christian. I just went to a church out of town instead of the Baptist mega church most kids at my school went to. My church was more conservative than theirs. But every time I tried to defend myself at school and said I believed in God, the Christian youth kids would retaliate that they'd never seen me at their church, so I must be lying. I got frustrated with that shit pretty fast and started to fake being pagan instead to freak them out more. That resulted in actually researching paganism, which led to questioning Christianity, which led to me leaving the church and becoming an atheist by the end of high school. So, thanks, bitches. I guess. That year I was a senior and I just did those bleached bits in the front of the hair. I usually changed the color once every other month. Orange, blue, purple, emerald green, etc. Teachers didn't care, just the principal. He just rolled his eyes but couldn't actually do anything because I was a good quiet kid and it wasn't against the dress code. All was well until my best friend colored her hair too. She was popular so it kinda took off from there. More and more girls did it. The next year a natural hair color was against the dress code. Sophomore year and up, I started handed out orange juice cartons I stole during breakfast. I also handed out food snacks to pretty much anyone who asked or said they were hungry, and I did it because public school cafeteria food is trash. Parents don't send their kids to school with anything better, and kids need to eat or else school is going to be hell. I also always had sauce packets in my bag whenever anyone needed any mayo. Looking back I think I might have been a food dealer, not that I charged anyone, but it was fun. I also was the local emo who wore metal cat ear headbands to school a lot. So there was that too. Dating a girl that was disliked by a large portion of the school. Mind you, I was apparently highly liked by an even larger portion of the school. After graduation I had so many people ask why I ever dated someone like her, with several girls coming right out and saying they would have dated me if I hadn't had a girlfriend. Looking back I find it kind of funny since I never thought of myself as an overly popular or good-looking kid. Guess in the year and a half that we dated I changed for the better. Anyway, I'm probably just as famous if not more famous now for breaking up with said girlfriend immediately after our graduation ceremony. Like we walked out of the building and while still in grad cap gowns mingling with various friends and family I told her I wanted to break up. We were even set to go off to college together in the fall. Needless to say, she was pissed, made a bit of a scene. This wasn't planned as I didn't want to be that guy who broke up with his long-term girlfriend just before graduation, but she kind of forced the issue. I did it because I had recently found out that a girl I had had a huge crush on since her sophomore year liked me, but I was dating this other girl so she never said anything. She told me because she didn't want to bring it up at some high school reunion years later and regret not doing it now. Have run into former teachers and classmates years later who have even brought up the whole graduation breakup incident. Long story short, said crush and I have been together since the very next week and just this past summer celebrated our 24th wedding anniversary and have 3 kids with both adore, so I'll happily accept my infamy. In high school, I was famous for being chaotic neutral incarnate. There was a week each semester we got to dress silly. I dressed up as a super old lady in a dress and powdered my hair white and everything for Old People Day. I did a perfect Nolan Batman impersonation in costume, running up to the teacher and saying I have a city to save. And then taking the bathroom pass and fucking around in the halls yelling Batman shit and practicing my action movie roles. Me and my friends used to take some cards that the middle schoolers stored their stuff in. They got lumped in with us after budget cuts so they didn't have lockers, threw all their shit out and rode them down the auditorium, crashing into the stage. I missed class all the time, but I still got decent enough grades by scribbling bullshit in as the teacher was taking papers up. All the teachers that knew me just stopped trying to control me. I never hurt anyone, so they just sighed and let me run off and do whatever stupid shit. I kind of miss that. I'm not 1,000th as fun now that life has consequences. I would negotiate with the principal early release of our class on non-curricular subjects. Some teachers hated me for it. Hence why I kept failing classes or be classified as a moron by some if not almost every teacher. Some teachers would say your older sister is way more intelligent than you, as in I supposedly had fill in her academic performance in some way. I was deemed a Nick the Negotiator as a first choice of discussion whenever our class wanted something, be it early reales or do something different to piss off teachers. I'll never forget taking one for the team several times for early release when someone has to stay behind and call in for the class. I got expelled for punching the lady principal in 6th grade. It started in pre-algebra class. I was talking to this girl and the teacher got past and said, "Since you were so smart, you want to get up and teach the class?" I said okay and went to the board and started teaching the class, and she got mad and sent me to the principal. In the principal's office, a redhead witch-looking bitch named Hazel Goodall, she threatened to suspend me, and it was last 2 weeks of school, and said you will miss exams and probably have to go to summer school, which I wouldn't have. I made all A's and B's, but being the smart ass I was, I said I don't care, this school sucks anyway, and this bitch jumps up with a wooden paddle, shoves me against the wall and has it to my throat, choking me out with the paddle. I couldn't breathe, so fight or flight kicks in and I punched in the chest then the throat and took off running to my house, which was 2 blocks away from school. Told my mom what happened and she threw me in her 1980 Corvette and peeled out of our driveway and went up to the school and threatened to kick the principal's ass. Needless to say, I changed schools to a private Baptist school, ugh, because I had been kicked out of every public school in our district. Turns out it was a much better school than public schools, so it all worked out in the long run, but I was known as the crazy kid that punched Ms. Goodall from then on. Nobody wanted their kid hanging out with me for fear that I would get their kid in trouble. Haha. I was a wild little hellion. Guess I still am. Only time I have ever hit a female, other than my big sister, but that's a whole different story. Depends on the year. It wasn't a whole school, but in elementary school, almost everyone in my grade knew me. All the teachers knew me for sure. I was just such an obedient kid, so they all liked me. And I had a brother, so almost everyone in his grade knew me too. Kindergarten, on the first day, I threw a temper tantrum because we had to go to lunch and I didn't want to stop drawing. First grade, nothing really. Second grade, most people in my class helped me with a bully that it was kinda my foolish self's fault for having. Third grade, I was the kid who always brought stuffed animals to school. Every single day. Fourth grade, nothing really, just everyone in my class knew I liked Harry Potter. Fifth grade, that year was crazy. First, I was the kid who literally tried mustard on everything, Effie pancakes and yogurt. Then I was the kid who could recite all of the book Fox and Socks from memory incredibly fast. I lost that talent. Sixth grade, first year of middle school. I wasn't famous at all. Seventh grade, I was, and still are, part of the emo LGBTQ+ friend group. I'm a weird little tiny one that's way too hyper, even though I'm the only one who doesn't drink caffeine. Everyone knew me because I was an idiot and smart at the same exact time. 8th grade, it coming up in a few weeks, y'all, I'm scared. In high school, I drove a 1968 Mustang GT convertible because it was the only car in the family that wasn't being driven daily. My pops valued his modest car collection over buying me something reasonable, and all my money went to drum gear. It was the only classic car in the parking lot and got quite a bit of attention, despite it definitely falling into the daily driver category. It was far from a show car. I changed high schools my senior year because a new high school was built that had more music programs and they allowed students to transfer freely. Little did I know the new HS was owned in the posh part of town, and my new classmates didn't understand anything older than they were. I went from being famous for having a rad-ass muscle car that no high schooler should be trusted with, to being the dude that must be poor because he wasn't driving a brand new Beamer. The suburbs are weird. Me and my 2 best friends would break about every non-critical school rule, but we were also on a roll, so not only we never got into trouble, we were good friends with the teachers. We wouldn't do any seriously wrong thing, but we would hang out in not allowed spaces, take down fruit from the trees, sneak into computer labs in the library to watch movies, get the Wi-Fi passwords from teachers' computers, and so on. The worst that would happen in retaliation would be the coordinator catching us and inviting us to eat in her office so we wouldn't cause more trouble. But we also represented the school in a national research competition, we're in the robotics team, we're on a roll, and I was a championship-winning member of the volleyball team. So they knew we meant no harm. Being the hall party girl. Anxiety and depression weren't a thing in the 80s, so I self-medicated with Sacco, wild turkey, and weed. Crippling self-loathing made me easy pickings for any boy that looked at me twice, but at the time I told everyone that I was taking control of my sexuality. For better or worse, it's been over 30 years and I still struggle with shame whenever I go back to that small town. I ended up with a relatively happy life and am a functional, sober, and appropriately medicated adult, but I grieve for that young girl and what she could have been given the right support. I think I'm late to this, but here goes nothing. In my first year at a new school during a middle school football practice in 8th grade, as a part of conditioning, we had to run backwards and I managed to trip over a ball bag and threw my hands behind me to try to catch myself. The end result was that I broke 3 bones in my forearms, fractured a 4th and dislocated my right thumb. The funny part is I didn't realize the damage for 20+ minutes and just thought it was rough sprain or something. After that I became known as the Broken Orchid because I had casts on both arms that went from above my elbow to tips of fingers for like 6-8 weeks. The time I completely lost my mind senior year. I was wrapped tighter than a spring due to stress and anxiety over college applications, SATs and just good old teenage angst. Our principal was this wretched nun who made no secret of her disdain towards students who weren't either jocks, NHS or who had rich parents. She would often make snide and condescending remarks to me and others since I didn't fall into any of her favored categories. Anyhow, so I'm ready to snap when senior. Mary Lucifer of the most vicious blood of Christ makes a snide and unnecessary comment to me, and that was enough to make me lose it. I went on a yelling tirade for I don't know how long, but I ended it by saying, and as for you, the only reason you became a sister is because the only man who could tolerate you is Christ himself. At that I packed up my book bag and walked out of the classroom. Went to the payphones, called home to tell my parents what just happened, and then went to the office, fully expecting to be expelled or suspended. I wasn't though. The teacher present at my outburst went to bat for me and defended me. Why this was so famous, besides saying some nasty shit to our principal, was because I was the super quiet kid in school, always respectful, always in uniform, never raised my voice or got in a fight. The #1 comment in my senior yearbook was people saying how they were gonna miss my morning smile and how ya doing. So for me to completely lose my shit was way out of character. We had a speech competition in middle school, and while I didn't win, it was pretty funny to most people. The topic was about Marvel and DCBTW, and I ended up being congratulated for it by people I didn't even know for the next few days. After that I was yesterday's news, but then the next year when we had them again, a classmate of mine recognized me from last year's competition, and it brought back that feeling again. I've never been famous for anything since, but that was one of the most memorable experiences I've had in school.